The power didn't flicker. It vanished. No Wi-Fi, no cable, no security systems, nothing. The entire neighborhood fell into digital darkness. Chaos erupted throughout Willowbrook Estates. Kids clutched dead tablets, remote workers stood in front yards clutching phones held high like antennae, and elderly neighbors came out, bewildered and terrified that their medical alert systems had malfunctioned. At the center of it all, Karen Mitchell. Our HOA president stood tall and smug in the fading twilight, arms crossed triumphantly beside a mangled pile of wood and metal. What used to be my tool shed, she turned to the crowd, lips curled in that familiar smug smile she wore whenever flexing her so-called authority. "Consider this eyesore officially removed," she announced, her voice dripping with fake professionalism. "We're restoring Willowbrook's visual integrity." But what Karen was unaware of, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that in her quest for neighborhood perfection, she had just blown up the single building keeping our entire digital universe afloat. My name is Tom Chen. I'm an IT professional for a big corporation downtown, but in our neighborhood, I'm kind of the go-to tech guru. 6 months ago, after a bad storm knocked out the utility lines that supplied our internet, I rode to the rescue. Velocity Communications needed a secure, climate-controlled space to house their emergency network node while repairs were delayed, thanks to permit backlogs and supply chain issues. My reinforced backyard tool shed was perfect. It had proper ventilation, its own electrical circuit, and a small AC unit I'd installed for my woodworking projects. The previous HOA board understood that and approved the temporary configuration. Everything was documented in emails, minutes of meetings, even a handshake agreement with then-President Jim Morrison shortly before he moved to Florida. But then Karen came along. She showed up 8 months ago and promptly ran a campaign to take over the HOA, bristling with an unused real estate license and a Texas-sized ego. She took it by 3 votes, promising to lower dues while somehow increasing property values through firm leadership. From the start of her tenure, the regulations came swift and swift. Mailbox heights measured to the millimeter. Grass violations cited if a blade was more than 2.5 inches high. She attempted to ban children's bicycles from driveways and required trash cans to be stored in garages within 30 minutes of collection. Nothing, though, consumed her more than my shed. The passive-aggressive notes under my windshield wiper were first, structure not compliant with community architecture, cramming with home design at roofline, too warm a paint color by half a shade. I explained the situation at 3 successive board meetings, presented the paperwork, pleaded for sanity. The outcome each time was that Karen puckered up her lips and tabled the issue for further review. Then came the certified letters, formal notices of non-compliance, fines, $50, then $100, then more. I paid them. I tried to be magnanimous. I offered even to repaint the shed, add shutters, anything to maintain the equipment. But Karen didn't ask for compromise. She asked for submission. So when I had to take off from one HOA meeting because of a work emergency, she took advantage. Focusing on her emergency authority as HOA president, she called in a demolition crew, her cousin's business, of course, and scheduled the tear down for a Tuesday morning while I was at the office. I'll never forget the call from Mrs. Rodriguez, my elderly neighbor. "Tom," I said to her, her voice trembling, "they're tearing down your shed. There's a bulldozer in your backyard." I assumed she was crazy until I could hear the rumble of heavy machinery in the background. I drove every traffic law in my way to get home, but when I arrived, it was finished. The hurricane-proof shed was reduced to rubble. The emergency network node, broken. Routers, switches, fiber optic cable, battery backups, all destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, gone. And then, the real blowback began. Mrs. Rodriguez's medical alert pendant beeped once and died. The Johnson security system failed and wailed. Garage doors went unresponsive. Thermostats froze up. Ring doorbells went out. Baby monitors went out. Tesla owners couldn't get updates. Smart locks on the rental property didn't work. Guests were trapped inside. The whole neighborhood's digital ecosystem collapsed like a row of dominoes. Our suburban street was turned into a cyber refugee camp in an hour. Homeowners lined front lawns holding phones to the sky. Children cried over lost Zoom classes. Teenagers freaked out over assignments lost. Local accountant Mike Donnelly saw his cloud backup service fail during tax season. And then, as if freshly awarded, Karen emerged from her residence, holding a tabbed, highlighted stack of HOA bylaws. She marched into the circle and started spouting. "Community standards must be upheld," she declared, as if that went without saying. She didn't really understand the rage circulating around her. So I got up. "Hear all," I bellowed. "That shed? That was not merely my workshop. That was the emergency telecom facility for the entire neighborhood. Bolted in place by Velocity Communications, sanctioned by the previous board, and now it's vanished." Karen did not burn a shed down. She cut our community loose from the rest of the digital world. There was silence, then chaos. The momentum of the crowd changed. Fury took over from confusion. Mothers realized their children could not get to school. Telecommuters felt dollar bills vanishing. Computer networks down. Security lost. Karen had tried to make the neighborhood lovelier by destroying a tool shed. Instead, she dropped us into a digital darkness. And it was only the beginning. The moment the community went dark, everything was in disarray. No cable, no Wi-Fi, no working security systems. Panic erupted at Willowbrook Estates as residents streamed into the streets. Kids embraced lifeless tablets. Telecommuters wildly waved phones trying to get a signal. Baffled and frightened elderly neighbors emerged from their homes when their medical alert systems failed. Standing in the center of the devastation was our infamous HOA president, Karen Mitchell. Arms folded across her chest, she stood proudly in front of what was once my backyard shed. A pile of splintered wood and twisted metal now. She wore that smug, self-congratulatory smile she always reserved for occasions when she thought she'd won. With a tone dripping with superiority, she declared that she had finally removed our spotless community of what she called an unauthorized eyesore. What Karen didn't realize was that she hadn't blown up a shed. She had blown up the only nexus point of infrastructure supporting our entire community online. My name is Tom Chen. By day, I'm a downtown company's IT staff. Locally, though, I'm the go-to tech guy. When last December's devastating storm blew out the neighborhood's main internet and cable lines, I came to the rescue. Velocity Communications, the phone company assigned to repair us, needed a temporary, secure, climate-controlled space to store emergency equipment. They just happened to find it in my air-conditioned, steel-fenced tool shed. The previous board of the HOA had concurred. All of it was on file: emails, minutes of meetings, even a formal city permit. Then along came Karen Mitchell. Armed with a hardly used real estate license and an ego the size of Texas, she ran for HOA president on the platform of increased regulation and prettier lawns. She won by a margin of 3 votes. When she was sworn in, she warred against anything that didn't fit her suburban utopia vision. Mailboxes were measured with rulers. Grass blades that grew higher than 2.5 inches were cited. She even tried to prohibit children's bikes on driveways. And then she latched onto my shed. The war started with passive-aggressive memos over color schemes and roof lines. I explained again and again at board meetings why the building was vital. I had papers, permits, contracts, but Karen didn't desire reason. She desired control. The fines started. $50 here, $100 there. I kept paying while trying to cooperate with the board. I even added cosmetic changes in for goodness sake just to keep things rolling. And then one morning, during an emergency when I was trapped in the office, Karen made her move. She invoked her emergency powers as HOA president to unilaterally command a demolition. She hired Dave's Demolition, run by her cousin no less, and had them demolish the shed. My first call was from my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. Her voice trembled in fear. "Tom, they're tearing down your shed. There's a bulldozer in your backyard." When I got home, it was nothing. All of it. Routers, fiber lines, battery backups, all over $300,000 of essential equipment reduced to dust. The price came soon enough. Mrs. Rodriguez's medical pendant malfunctioned. Smart home alarms went blaring. Garage doors stuck. Baby monitors went dead. Ring doorbells, thermostats, even electric cars out of operation. That was followed by a digital apocalypse. Hundreds of people flooded into the streets, clutching phones, trying to get connected. And in the middle of it all, Karen stood smugly with highlighted copies of HOA bylaws. She lectured us on aesthetic harmony and unauthorized structures, seemingly unaware of the crisis she had created. So I released bombshell number one. Ladies and gentlemen, I stated, that shed was our emergency telecom hub. Every house in Willowbrook Estates was run through it. Karen didn't remove a shed. She shut down our entire neighborhood. The crowd gelled at once. Parents couldn't do homework with their kids. Professionals couldn't attend meetings. Even Tesla owners couldn't get software updates. Our neighborhood watch president cautioned all of us that the shared security camera system, which had earned accolades last week for deterring package theft, was down. Karen attempted to pivot, said we hadn't done the proper permits, said it could have been illegal, said she'd saved us all from a liability. So I played my second card. I showed everyone the signed contract with Velocity Communications, the city permit, the correspondence with the previous board, and I dropped something Karen hadn't considered, her own HOA upgrades, the gate switch, and security cameras. They were run through that very building. Her face fell. Emergency responders began arriving. Intelligent smoke detectors had failed. Medical alarms had not sounded. Police were taking statements. And I was documenting. Photographs, screenshots, testimonies. It was a mountain of proof. The HOA held an emergency meeting that evening, standing room only. Neighbors stood up one by one and recounted their tales, missed appointments, lost revenue, failed tests, financial setbacks. Then it was my turn. I put the contracts out, the permits, the receipts, then I dropped the legal bomb. By U.S. Code Title 18, Section 1362, knowingly destroying communications infrastructure is a federal crime. Dead silence. Karen stood up from her chair, shaking with rage, screaming about her power. She proclaimed me the real criminal. That's when board member Janet Loyu inserted herself calmly. Fact is, Karen, she said to her, there's no record of emergency approval for this. You've spent HOA money without board consent. That's embezzlement. And destroying permitted utility equipment? Vandalism. Quite possibly a felony. Even the other board members were drawing their chairs back from her. Treasurer Robert Walsh swore to the check to Dave's demolition. $15,000, no bids, no vote. Secretary Marcus Bennett added that protocol required multiple warnings, a hearing, and a board vote. A petition made its way like wildfire. Over 200 signatures demanded Karen's removal. Then Sarah Kim, Velocity Communications chief technician, walked into the room. She checked for damage. $347,000 worth of lost equipment, $100,000 in repair costs. The insurance would not cover because the damage had been intentionally caused. Velocity threatened a lawsuit. Not just the HOA, Karen herself. When the time came to vote the board, it was unanimous. Karen was removed, but she would not go quietly. She took the mic and had a tirade, accused everybody of betrayal, bashed conspiracy, threatened lawsuits, but then 2 sheriff's deputies showed up. They were there on the books. A number of residents had made complaints criminally. The DA's office was already involved. The next few weeks were a blur of law. I sued Karen and the HOA for utility service interference and destruction of property. Velocity sued for full damages. The FCC, State Utilities Commission, and even federal prosecutors got involved. The final straw? Dave, Karen's cousin, admitted she'd told him to burn it all, including the clearly labeled telecom equipment. He had a recorded phone call to prove it. Karen was made liable for nearly $500,000 in damages in court. Negligence had to be paid by the HOA too. And that was not all. At federal court, Karen was charged with destruction of critical infrastructure, reckless endangerment, among others. Evidence was such that her actions caused disruption of emergency services, destroyed health care, and even delayed help for an elderly woman who had fallen. The jury deliberated for a little less than 2 hours. Guilty. The judge, fed up with Karen's obnoxiousness and lack of remorse, handed down the maximum sentence. 2 years in federal prison, 3 years probation, and $200,000 in criminal penalties. As the bailiff cuffed her, she screamed about conspiracies and threatened to take everyone's homes. But the doors of the courtroom shut behind her. And then, after months, Willowbrook Estates was tranquil and had a working internet connection.